There is a state of mind that the greatest performers in the world describe but almost never explain. Athletes call it being in the zone, surgeons call it pure focus, special forces soldiers call it operational clarity, artists call it flow. They use different words because none of them fully capture what it actually is. A condition where the mental noise disappears, where doubt, distraction, and overthinking stop interfering with what you're doing, where the mind becomes a perfect instrument, not because it's trying harder, but because it has finally stopped getting in its own way. Japanese warrior tradition has a name for this state that is more precise than any of those descriptions. They call it Mushin, the mind without mind, and unlike flow, which people wait for as if it were a gift, Mushin is something that can be trained. Deliberately, systematically, until it becomes available to you on demand. If your mind is constantly loud, full of second-guessing, distraction, and mental static that keeps you from thinking and performing at your best, this video is for you. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and tell me in the comments, in what situation does your mental noise cost you the most? Performance, decisions, relationships? Write it down. That's the first act of clarity. Let's go. This is the story of a woman named Leticia, 35 years old, lawyer. Brilliant by every external measure, sharp arguments, fast thinking, a track record that made her colleagues nervous. But inside, her mind was never quiet. Before every important meeting, the loop started. What if I miss something? What will they think if I stumble? I should have prepared more. Am I actually ready for this? The same questions, in the same order every time, arriving precisely when she needed to be sharpest. During negotiations, she was physically present but mentally split. One half of her engaged with the argument, the other watching herself from the outside, analyzing her own performance in real time, critiquing every word as it left her mouth. She described it as trying to drive while someone in the back seat constantly narrates everything you're doing wrong. She tried therapy, she tried journaling. She tried the usual advice: breathe deeply, think positive, visualize success. Some of it helped at the edges, none of it touched the core, because the core wasn't anxiety. It wasn't low confidence. It was something more fundamental, a mind that had never been taught to be still. And a mind that cannot be still cannot be fully used. In Japanese martial arts, Mushin, mu, meaning without, and shin, meaning mind or heart, describes the mental state of a warrior who has trained so completely that thought no longer interferes with action. The sword moves. The response happens. There is no commentary running in the background. No second-guessing, no performance anxiety. Just pure, unobstructed presence. The common misunderstanding about Mushin is that it means an empty mind, a blank state, absence of thought. That's not what it is. Mushin is a mind that is free from attachment to thought. The difference is enormous. Thoughts still arise. Observations, perceptions, instincts, but they pass through without being grabbed, without being analyzed mid-action, without pulling the warrior out of the present moment. The mind is not empty, it is uncluttered, not silent, undistracted. The ancient masters described it as a mirror. A mirror doesn't choose what to reflect. It doesn't comment on the reflection. It doesn't hold on to the last image after the subject has moved. It simply reflects, perfectly and completely, whatever is in front of it. Mushin is that quality of mind, fully responsive to reality, unfiltered by the noise of self-consciousness. A cognitive neuroscientist at the University of California, who has spent 16 years studying high-performance mental states, found something that reframes everything we think we know about focus. The brain's default mode network, responsible for self-referential thought, rumination, and mental time travel, is the primary enemy of peak performance. When it's active, cognitive resources are being consumed by thinking about thinking. The practitioners who consistently perform at the highest level under pressure share one measurable trait: the ability to suppress default mode activity on demand. What they call clarity, the brain scanner calls default mode deactivation. What the samurai called Mushin, neuroscience is only now beginning to map. When Leticia first heard about Mushin, her reaction was immediate and predictable. That's for martial artists. My work is cognitive. I need my analytical mind. I can't just empty my head and walk into a negotiation. This is the most common objection, and the most expensive one. Because Mushin doesn't ask you to stop thinking, it asks you to stop thinking about thinking. The analysis Leticia needed in the negotiation room was sharp and available. It had been built over years of study and practice. What was interfering with it wasn't a lack of thought. It was an excess of self-monitoring. The internal narrator watching the performance was consuming exactly the cognitive bandwidth she needed for the performance itself. Her first training was not meditation, not breathwork. It was something the martial arts traditions have used for centuries that almost no one applies outside the dojo. Deliberate repetition under pressure until the response becomes precognitive. She chose one type of argument she encountered regularly and drilled her response to it. Not to memorize words, but to internalize the structure so deeply that when the moment came, the response was already there. No accessing, no retrieving, no real-time construction. Already there. The first time it happened in a real negotiation, she noticed the silence. The internal narrator had nothing to say. The argument had already arrived before the self-conscious mind had time to interfere. She described it afterward as, "I didn't perform well. I just performed," as if there was no distance between me and what I was doing. That distance, the gap between the self and the action, is exactly what Mushin eliminates. The warrior traditions that developed Mushin didn't achieve it through a single technique. They passed through 3 progressive gates, each one dismantling a different layer of mental interference. The first gate is Munen, no unnecessary thought. The practice here is learning to distinguish between thoughts that serve the present moment and thoughts that are simply noise. In any high-stakes situation, most mental activity is commentary, evaluation, judgment, self-surveillance that contributes nothing to performance. Munen is the discipline of noticing that commentary and refusing to follow it. Not suppressing it, not arguing with it, simply not engaging, letting it arise and pass without giving it a seat at the table. The second gate is Muga, no fixed self. This is the deeper and more uncomfortable gate. Most mental noise originates from the ego's need to protect its image, to perform well so others will think well of you, to avoid failure so your self-concept remains intact. Muga is the practice of releasing your attachment to the outcome of your own performance. Not because results don't matter, but because the moment you are performing for your image, you are using cognitive resources to manage perception instead of execute the task. The warrior who fights to protect their reputation fights divided. The warrior who fights without ego fights whole. The third gate is Zanshin, sustained awareness. Unlike the Zanshin in Fudoshin, here it refers specifically to the quality of attention that doesn't spike and crash. Most people focus in bursts, intense concentration, followed by mental drift, followed by the effort to refocus, which itself consumes energy. Zanshin in the context of Mushin is an even, continuous, effortless awareness, not held by force, but maintained through the absence of the distractions that usually pull attention away. When Munin and Muga are cultivated, Zanshin becomes natural. The mind doesn't need to be dragged back to the present. It never fully left. 6 months into her Mushin practice, Leticia handled the most important negotiation of her career. A case that had been building for 2 years. Opposing counsel who was widely considered the best in the field. A room full of people for whom the outcome had enormous financial and reputational stakes. She told me afterward that she couldn't fully explain what happened in that room, not because it was mysterious, but because there was almost nothing to report. She had prepared. She walked in. She was there. Every argument that came at her was met. Every opening was seen and used. There was no moment of panic, no internal narrator running commentary, no performance anxiety consuming her bandwidth. Her colleague who had watched the whole thing said, "I've seen you in 100 negotiations. That was different. You looked like someone who already knew how it was going to end." She didn't know how it was going to end. She simply wasn't thinking about how it was going to end. She was only there, completely, undistractedly, usefully there. Present in a way that most people spend their entire lives trying to manufacture and never quite reaching. That is what Mushin builds. Not a technique for high-pressure moments, a default state of mind that stops treating the present as a threat to be managed and starts treating it as the only place where anything real ever happens. Most people live in their own commentary about their life. Mushin is the practice of living in the life itself. And once you've tasted that clarity, even once, even for a few seconds, the noise of the untrained mind becomes something you are no longer willing to accept as normal. If this changed how you see mental clarity, not as something that happens to you in good moments, but as something you build through the right practice, subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell. Every week, tools for building the kind of mind that performs when it matters most. And tell me in the comments, which of the three gates, Munin, Muga, or Zanshin, describes the interference you face most? Where is your mental noise loudest? Name it, because the gate you most resist walking through is always the one you need most. I'll see you in the next one.